Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 12th edition of Crossing the Divide, a show that attempts to promote and encourage common sense as we look and analyze the current events and issues facing the town of Winchester. My name is Glenn Albanesius, and as I always am joined by my friend Mr. Ken Fracasso. Tonight we're going to kind of help the audience take a look at some of the projections as we head into the final budget that I think Ken is due to us on the 15th of March, correct?
Correct, just Friday, yep.
And again, as we've tried to in the past, we're going to try to be as detailed as we possibly can, explain to those that choose to watch the show kind of what the real story is behind the numbers, how we got here, more importantly, how we go from here, where we go from here, and a little bit of roadmap that Ken and I believe pretty strongly will get us, back on the path of fiscal responsibility. Clearly, the events that have taken up the past couple selectmen's meetings have indicated that there's been some, pretty serious issues leading up to where we are right now. We've shared those in the past. We'll go through some of it again tonight, but as always, I'll turn it over to Ken, and you can get started with some numbers.
Well, thanks, Glenn. Unfortunately, the spending in town has far exceeded our revenues, and has been doing that for quite some time. The sources or the reasons for these overspending, the primary one is unbudgeted debt service, which has ranged between $200,000 and $800,000 for the past 10 years. And that's what has gotten us in this present situation that we're in right now. Another contributing factor is the fact that we've had overspending for several years. I'm not exactly sure, but I think there was like 5 or 6 years that the Board of Ed had overspent, as well as other departments. And this has been as I said, a contributing factor to the fact that we've had the unbudgeted debt service for so many years. Now, it all came to a head this past year in late October, early November, and the fact is that we have spent the entire fund balance as well as any cash that was in a variety of various different town accounts. Right. So the way to get ourselves out of this is, we have to replenish those accounts, and we have to budget properly moving forward. But as I said, the problem this year is, there is no cushion. We're looking at what we believe is a projected deficit for this fiscal year in the range of $3 million. And where those numbers come from are the $1.2 million in Board of Education expenses that were carried over from the 11-12 fiscal year. There's also an anticipated $1.2 million overestimated of revenues that was revealed to us in a letter to OPM from the town manager that he crafted with our interim finance director. At our last selectmen's meeting, we were told that there's approximately $500,000 in unfunded town debt that relates to the water and sewer division. And also at our last selectmen's meeting, Board of Education member Mimi Vailo informed us that there was a $300,000 pension contributions for the Board of Ed. Mm-hmm. And now these are not teachers. They are in a separate pension fund. These are other workers. I believe it's janitorial staff. I don't know if they have a kitchen staff over there, but they are non-educational positions. There was a letter that came out, I believe it was late last fall, probably around the same time that we were informed of these financial disasters, that they were questioning these pension contributions that had not been made yet. So, those are the main reasons. Let's like to go back for a minute. That $1.2 million. Now, last November, the majority of the Board of Selectmen voted to put $1.3 million back in the education budget. But because there were no funds to do this, I believe only $100,000 that was actually money that we had to give to them. So, that's a huge hole in itself right there. And the second item, the overestimated revenues, I know there was some money from the RRD1. There were some revenues for the building department that I knew they would never realize. There were issues from the town clerk's office that were just, numbers that they weren't going to see as far as revenue projections are concerned, as well as many other areas. So, but here again, the problem, we aren't told of this in a timely fashion, and I think that's a big problem. We need to get the information so we know what we're looking at and how to correct it. The water and sewer, King and King's been doing a good job, I think, of looking at that issue and getting back to us. And the town attorney was also present that night, and we had a presentation on where we've gotten to as far as that concerned. And then I said, as I mentioned earlier, the pension contributions. So I mean, there's plenty of stuff to look at. I mean, that's an excess of $3 million right there.
Right. And just one point, Ken, I want to make clear tonight too, is the 1.2 million from the Board of Ed, that, just to be fair to them, that was not an overspend on their part. It was money that, we paid or were supposed to pay from, expenses that they incurred last budget, but got basically carried over to this year. And that really blindsided us. If I remember correctly, that when that came out, that certainly was, a shock to everybody. Mm-hmm. But
well, the reason was that all that money was used to pay for unbudgeted things in the budget. Right. So expenses, excuse me. And it's just it's snowballed. And I mean, unless we wrap our hands around it now and do something to correct it, there's not going to be any end to this. Right. It's just going to continue, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. Right. I mean, we had a $4+ million hole in before Christmas time, and we've used money for taxes that were received for the January payment. A lot of people pay them in December, and nothing's been changed so far to replenish any of those monies. And the same thing's going to occur whether it be in April or May, if we even wait that long. I mean, we do know that there are there are bills that have not been paid, but we don't know to what extent. Right. And this is the problem. We need to have this information sooner rather than later. Right.
And it has trickled out at best. I would say that we've been asking pretty, almost every meeting that we have, we ask for more numbers, and Jane, to her credit, has been working hard, but I mean, the real hard, fast numbers that we've asked for have, not come out probably as quickly as we would have hoped.
Right. Well, it's slow at best. I mean, and we get it in bits and pieces. We've asked about this Board of Ed money, 1.2 million, for months. I mean, we're not talking about weeks. We're talking about several months. And they finally said, when we had that first budget workshop meeting in the Blue Room, that they had in fact used money in this year's current budget to pay last year's expenses. Right. As far as overestimating the revenues, that may be more, that may be less. We don't know. Right. I mean, but we need to get this information. What we do know for a fact is, though, we are going to be $500,000 short on that unfunded town.
Well, we had that one, again, budget meeting where, they went department by department, and you did start to see it unravel. Right. With the building department admitting that the revenues that they were going to take in, were not going to be what they anticipated. Right. And throughout some of the other departments, you could see a trend starting. So it's just one of 4 categories here that we need to address pretty quickly. And again, you and I will chat in a couple minutes about where this is all headed. But I think the decisions that the town has to make, the voters, when it comes time to the budget, is whether or not we want to tackle this head on, or if we want to, stretch it out, over the next couple of years, which I think you and I are in agreement probably isn't going to work.
No, I definitely don't think that it will. And to that point, I mean, not to add more insult to the injury that's already existing here, but water and sewer, at King and King's suggestion, they brought this up here again at our last meeting, that they intend to raise the water rates by 20%, and they intend to raise the sewer rates by 35%. I mean, these are huge numbers. For what did they say? It was like 24 or 2,500 users currently. Yep. And we're just coming off a year that we've had a reval done. Now, everyone's property is worth less money, and there are, I believe it was 1,100 households that are going to see an increase in their taxes this year. And I'd be willing to bet that a large proportion of those 1,100 households that are going to be paying more in taxes because of the reval are also the same people that are on the water and sewer.
So it's a double hit.
It's a double hit. And then if there's going to be a request to tax more to try to get out of the financial hole that we're in, I mean, I think we're just asking the impossible here.
We are.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, and again, we've had the conversation over and over, it's not so much that we believe, Winston taxpayers and citizens vote against tax increases just, for that alone, but there isn't really a track record of wise spending, and that's the direction that you and I want to try to head the town, sooner or later.
Right. We hear time and time again, too, when it gets to the budget season that, 0, 0, 0, this is what you get. But please, I mean, just sit back for a minute and take a look at this. There have been those zero budget increases here. We've overspent every single year. And the main reason is the fact that we've under budgeted, for what we need to make this town run properly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is finally, like I said, this has caught up to us after the past 10 years, and this is where we are now.
Right.
So, but this isn't something that's impossible to correct. It can be fixed, but this cannot be done over several years. It can't be done over 3 or 4 or 8 years. I mean, I think that this water and sewer plan was based on an 8-year
Right.
payback, try to get even, and that has its own problems still. I mean, there's no money in there for capital improvements.
Right.
And what's going to happen if we have a water main break? I mean, the main one.
Right.
There's no money for problems like that. So inevitable, it's just going to come back to the town anyway. So we're going to have more spending, more overspending, because these things are not budgeted for properly.
Right.
So
And it brings us full circle to what we've been speaking about for a couple of years now, as far as the the town services that we offer, and it is. I think it's incumbent on the board, whatever however it happens, that we really start to look at some real serious restructuring, because without that, you can't nickel and dime the situation.
Right.
Ultimately, there's going to be a creditor that is not going to wait, the 30, 60, 90, 120 days, and they're going to, either take us to court or file some kind of action. And I think it just, goes downhill from there.
And then, as I said before, it's going to be game over. I mean, as you just stated, we have been, campaigning and proposing that we do the 3 R's: reduce, restructure, and reinvest. And now it's more obvious than ever that this is what needs to be done, because there's no way that we can raise taxes to get out of this hole. I mean, the only way we're going to do this is through reduction, reinvestments, and restructuring.
Right.
And and this has to happen right now.
Right.
I mean, we've put forth looking into privatization of public works, which may not be popular with some people, but I mean, I haven't heard anything from the other side of the table.
No.
We also talked about, it was brought up over a year ago that we were going to look into getting rid of civil service. And for whatever reason, that kind of got sidetracked and it just got dropped by the wayside. But these are the kinds of things that need to be done. We can't keep with the status quo. We can't hold on to what we're doing and think that anything's going to change, because it's not going to.
And it was made clear with the last selectmen's meeting, where Mrs. Valley did get up and spoke very, pointedly to you and I that, do we have a secret recipe for, how all this restructuring is going to work? And listen, the reality is that we don't. The details and the projected savings, have to come from Dale. That's his job. We instruct him or ask him to come to the table with some specifics and some details. We do need that to happen. Her first point was about the combining of the finance departments.
Right.
And I tried to bring up, as politely as possible, the point that the town overwhelmingly saw the value in that. When you have, finance director for the town, finance director for the Board of Ed, and finance director for Gilbert, that's weighted too heavily on administrators. You just don't need it. You can't afford that. And listen, it's unpopular. We've said it time and time again here at this show that, you know, the things that need to be done are painful. They're going to hurt. They're going to be ugly. It's like making sausage. But, you know, ultimately we got to start to do this. And how we get there, I'm not sure. But I think we just continue to, you know, make the comments and statements that we have, and hopefully they resonate with people.
Well, let's not forget, we're only 2 votes. I'm 1, you're 1.
Right.
That's 2.
Right.
We've been titled as malcontent 1 and malcontent 2. But, I mean, at least we're putting some ideas out there. And as you stated, you're exactly right. You know, we put ideas out there where we think that there are some substantial savings. And, you know, it's up to the department heads and Dale as the town manager, he's the CEO of this town, to put those numbers together. And they're, you know, it's not a lot of work. I mean, it's substantial, but it's not, you know, overwhelming. I mean, you look at payroll, insurance cost, pension cost, you know, their sick days and holiday pay, and, you know, if they were to be let go, if this was a path that we decided to take, you know, what the unemployment cost would entail. I mean, it's not something that couldn't be done in a relatively short period of time.
Right.
I know that he's spoken to the town attorney about this. I'm sorry, not the town attorney, the labor attorney, excuse me. And so it's not like it's something new.
Right, and we've asked repeatedly for these things, and, you know, we've kind of danced around the subject to the point now where, like Ken just said, I mean, the other side in both, you know, the past couple budget meetings have really looked across the table at Ken and I and said, well, you know, what are your plans? I mean, there's virtually nothing coming up from that side, and I understand that. I don't think they have many, you know, ideas as far as how they're going to get out of this. I'm blaming them for it, but, you know, I think the fact that, you know, at least you and I have had the courage to say, hey, you've got to take a look at some of this stuff.
Right.
That, you know, that's the conversation that has to, you know, it has to continue. And if it doesn't, I think the town is in dire straits.
If we, you know, I'd like to come back to a little bit more of the descriptive talk in a minute, but if we could, I believe that we have just 2 more charts I'd like to throw up there. The first one is what a typical town budget would look like. If we had, the blue represents revenue, so the town's similar to ours. If there was 30 million in the first year, if there was $30 million in revenue and $30 million in expenses, then, you know, there would be no change in the fund balance. In the second year, if you had $30 million in revenue, but you had $33 million in expenses, you know, maybe something that happened that wasn't planned or an emergency, then you would need to take $3 million from your fund balance to cover that. And then in the third year, if you were able to increase the revenues, $33 million, and you had $30 million in expenses, then you'd have $3 million, you know, returned to your fund balance, so that you'd have a fund balance. That's how it would work in a typical town. If we go to the next chart, we have something what resembles the Winston town budgets. In year 1, if we had, let's see that chart coming up. In the first year, if we had $30 million in revenues and $33 million in expenses, we would have to take $3 million from the fund balance in order to cover that. In year 2, if the same thing happened, we had $30 million in revenues and $33 million in expenses, there is no money in the fund balance. And that's where we are right now, folks. We have no money in the fund balance. So in the following year, the year that we're looking at right now, if we had $30 million in revenues and $26 million in expenses, that's a $3 million shortfall. We'd have to put $1 million, you know, back into the fund balance, and that's what we need to do.
Right.
We need to put money into the fund balance,
right,
and we need to take whatever this budget is going to be this year, and, you know, I guess a way to look at it, or the way I look at it, is the very first line item is, you know, how do we replenish that $3 million shortfall, if in fact that's the number. And by all accounts, I mean, that's all we have to go by right now. You know, if we go back to the very first chart that we had, that's what we're looking at. The 1.2 for the Board of Ed expenses, the overestimated revenues, the $500,000 from the unfunded town debt, and the $300,000 that we're short on the pension funds.
Right.
So that's the way that, you know, we believe that it should be addressed.
And none of these can you know, you can't kick the can down the street on really any of these things,
Nope.
because although we've made every pension payment to anybody that is owed that, the situation you want to avoid any possibility that someone makes a claim and the money's not there.
Right.
Then you got a serious problem.
And that's a point well made. Anyone that is receiving pension money right now is getting their pension
Correct.
check.
Right.
This is, what's going to, much like the situation right now. There's going to come a time, if we don't straighten this out right now, that there's not going to be money for this, and then we're going to be in real trouble.
Right. And that 300,000, Mimi made her point that money has come over from the Board of Ed, and it was, a deposit was made,
Right.
but it's been used. And again,
Well, I think they're verifying that right now. I think Jane said that she was looking into that, and whether there was that much, passed over or not. But that's something that they're supposed to get back to
back
us
to
on.
us and let us know. Okay.
Right.
But either way, again, when you look at the four components of this deficit, you're looking at things that have to be addressed pretty quickly. And that number that you just spoke about, the 26 million, we think that's the magic number that we've got to hit, that allows us to put the million or close to that in the fund balance, and really starts the restoration of our fiscal sanity.
Right, and this will lead into another problem, because out of that 26 million, nearly 20 million of that is for education, 19,982.
Right.
And that's without their grants, state and federal grants that they get, which I believe puts them up around 22 or 23 million. But from our perspective, I mean, there's 20 of that 26 million is going to go to education, and I firmly believe that they should be making some, cutbacks over there. But I'm afraid that being here as long as I have, in dealing with the members that are on the Board of Education, I don't think anything's going to change there until the personnel on the Board of Education change. I mean, I think they're steadfast in where they're going and what they want. I mean, we came to loggerheads as far as the school closure goes, and it's unfortunate, but so to try to run the town on $6 million without some severe reductions in restructuring, this is not going to happen, folks. It's just not going to happen.
Right. And it's clearly going to be an opportunity for the two sides, whatever those two sides are, headed into the upcoming election, to state their feelings as to whether or not they feel, you can put any of this off, or are we going to address it straight on, during the current budget year. And I think it's going to be very telling. I think, it'll be interesting to see what Dale comes up with for his budget in a couple days. Certainly Ken and I have given him some broad ideas of where we think this needs to go, and I think he's listened. Ken, I know you were in a couple meetings with him recently, and I guess we hold out hope that when he comes to the table on the 15th, that he certainly factors in what we're seeing here as a pretty evident problem.
Right. Well, the monies, I mean, it's no different in municipal government as in private enterprise. I mean, the biggest expense are the employees and the insurance and the health benefits. And it's not just public works that we're looking at. And this isn't something that's been a new idea. It's come up a couple of years ago, but once again, like I say, the ball was dropped. But we may be looking at town hall being closed, multiple days a week in order to get ourselves realigned into what we can afford.
Right.
It's not just one particular group. I mean, I gather no joy out of doing something like this. These are drastic decisions and they're tough decisions. But I mean, we have to look out for the entire population. Not just 10 people here or 15 people there that are employees of the town. I mean, we need to do what we think needs to be done to get us on the right track and straighten this mess out.
Right. And listen, Ken, we've said this time and time again, we take no joy in painting such a bleak picture. That is a fact, and anybody that knows us knows that to be the truth. The upside to all this is that if we do, a good part of what we're asking for here is that within a fairly quick amount of time, we'll be repositioned to be exactly where we want to be as far as having a fund balance, and then being able to get to the reinvesting part of the equation, as we've said over and over again. But you don't get there without addressing these issues here, and that certainly is what Ken and I have called for on a repetitive basis. Will continue as long as we're sitting in these chairs, asking the public to support us or come up with other ideas. But we have to stay focused on what the mission is, and right now it's addressing this deficit. I heard tonight coming down to the meeting that Hartford is running a $70 million budget.
Right. Yeah.
And the response by the mayor was that he didn't want people to get overly discouraged about that. Well, I'm not so sure I would take that point of view, because I think we shouldn't be discouraged, but we certainly should be acting on what we're facing here in town.
Right.
Because it is a correctable problem.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it is going to be painful. We're not trying to paint a picture that it's not going to. I mean, this isn't rosy whatsoever. But the hardest part is going to be the first part, as you just stated. The first part of this equation is going to be the most painful. But once we can see our way through that, I think that we'll be on a road to recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and there will be some positive ways.
Right.
I mean, if not, this is going to be left for the courts and the state to decide. And once again, I've stated this time and time again, that's the last thing that we, or I believe anyone who has any idea how these things work, is going to want to see, happen here in this town.
Right, and Ken couldn't have said it any clearer. We've heard, recently during public comment that, maybe the state should come in. We do not want that, folks. Listen to us when we say that. We do not want that to happen. We need to take care of this on our own, do the right things, make ourselves whole again, because we can do it. But everyone's got to come to the table. Everybody that is part of the town Board of Ed, water and sewer, everybody has to pull their fair share and make this work out.
Right. We can't ignore it any farther, folks. And dramatic tax increases aren't the answer. I mean, that's not going to fix the problem. I mean, we need to address where and how we spend our money, and that's critical.
And that's a common thread in every municipality. Ken, we see it time and time again. Well, I think we're at the end of our half hour. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us, and look forward to the next show. Thank you.
Good night.